one of the things that you really need to balance in today's world is creating high value interactions with your users, not just high volume.
Welcome to Uptech Report. Uptech Report is sponsored by Terraleap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today is our Apply Tech series. I'm excited to be joined by my guest, Troy Goode, who's based in San Francisco, California. He's the founder and CEO of Courier. Welcome, Troy. Good to have you on, man.
Thanks, Alexander. Good to see you.
Now, Courier is, as I pulled from your website, a notification management system. Now, built for the engineers out there to manage multi-channel app notifications at scale. So if you need a fast way to add multi-channel notifications to your web, desktop, or mobile app, might be an intriguing platform that engineers want to check out. Help me understand, Troy, where did you see the initial problem? I mean, notifications are everywhere. What are you doing? Why is it different? What was the problem you saw?
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by trade. I've spent about 2 decades now leading engineering teams as well. And once upon a time, I led engineering for a company called Eloqua, which is an email marketing automation system. We ended up taking that company public and selling to Oracle. After that, I kind of had messaging on my brain, and I was the VP of engineering and CTO of a couple of other startups. And one of the things I saw was that the marketing teams at the companies I was working for had marketing automation systems like Eloqua or Marketo or HubSpot, but I still saw that the engineers on my team were spending a lot of time building infrastructure for the product originated notifications that we were sending, the things that a marketer doesn't send, but that our product sends, right?
The updates, what's normal happens in notifications in your app or whatever.
Sure, I mean updates certainly, but think about things like invites, or if I'm building a collaboration tool and I @mention you, or I need a digest to let me know what happened at the end of the week, right? There are a lot of different notifications. Actually, most of our customers have about 150 different kinds of notifications they send, even as something as simple as a password reset, right? It's one of the main user interfaces for your product. So I
saw the notifications.
I saw this happening. I saw my team spending a lot of time on it. And there was an inflection point at one point where one of my teams was working on a collaboration feature in the product. And that @mention use case I just described, we wanted something better there. Like @mentions are useless if you don't get a notification when it happens, right? Like it's just like, what's
once
the
they
point?
pay attention and they don't know that you tagged them. Yeah.
Right. It's not useful for you. It's not useful for them. So we needed something. And we started off with email notifications. And then we heard from users, this is kind of annoying if I'm already in the product collaborating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that makes sense. And we eventually built out a mobile app as well. So you had kind of the web experience, you had the mobile experience. And so eventually we said, okay, well, what makes sense here? What do the best in class companies do? And there was a common theme. What they would do is they would say, look, if you're delivering a notification to somebody who's already inside of your product using it, send them that via in-app notification, right? Show a badge, show a bell, show a little toast pop up from the corner of the screen. But that only works if they're currently inside the product. So what you need to do is say, are they currently in the product? If so, deliver it that way. If they're not, now you have a choice to make. Should I send it to mobile push? Well, that requires you to have an app and requires that the users downloaded it and requires that they've accepted mobile push. Or do I go to something like email? And so ultimately what I told my team I wanted was, hey, let's pick those 3 channels and let's send it to the best channel for Alexander right this second, right? And so they went off, kind of did the design, came back to me with a bill, and I was like, it was a big one. And honestly, I just couldn't justify taking my team away from kind of our core value prop long enough to justify building it. So that's kind of what started to get Courier on my mind.
So it's like you saw that the root need. Okay, people do need notified that it's there. And you're like, yep. Okay, and it would be nice if they were notified in the right way, the right place of where they happen to be at that time that they would want it. Right. And they're like, all right, let's do it. That can't be hard. But then you see a giant bill.
Yeah, it was surprisingly hard. And so it was going to be months of work for our team, and just to get it built out. And that was just, that's just one feature. We had other things we had to build.
And time is money. Time is everything. And so when you're building an application, do you take the time to build a whole notification solution or system or not? And I guess that's the root of the question that you are posing here as developers out there. They don't need to take the time to build out a whole multi-channel notification
That's right.
solution. They can just hook into yours.
That's our thesis, right? That's what that's what we started the company to do.
Now, truly, I mean, the complexity of notifications. Can you speak into any more about like your tech stack of just how it works and maybe just the time savings truly that this comes into play?
Yeah, well, so notifications are tough both from the configuration and programmability standpoint because every company is different. Every company has a different combination of channels they're interested in, whether it be email, SMS, mobile push, in-app, Slack, WhatsApp, right? There are a lot of different channels that you might want to send on. Different providers for each of them. So if you're sending via SMS, do you use Twilio? Do you use MessageBird? Do you use Plivo? Do you use Vonage, Bandwidth, etc.? So there's complexity there. But also a big challenge is just dealing with, certainly for a service provider like us, is dealing with scale, right? Because our customers use us via API, right? So they're not coming in and clicking send, 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 right? They're calling us from their products. And that means that we can get huge bursts of volume kind of in unpredictable times. And we need to be able to scale rapidly to meet that demand because that's part of what our customers are paying us for is queue these up, retry these, ensure deliverability, offload not just the templating and routing, but also the actual active delivery.
Is deliverability an issue when it comes to notifications?
It's a huge issue. So each channel has its own deliverability challenges. I think email is probably the best known here, right? Like do what you can. Here's the top 20 ways to avoid being put in the spam folder, right? So there's industries that have popped up around email deliverability, but other channels likewise have deliverability issues. SMS, for example, let's say you pick a provider. That provider's probably going to have different deliverability rates depending on geographic region. So email, like if you solve the spam problem for email, you've solved it for your US customers, your EU customers, your Asian customers. That's not the case for SMS because ultimately companies like Twilio and MessageBird and Plivo, et cetera, they're a layer on top of the downstream telecom carriers. And so depending on their relationship and their connectivity with each of them, success can vary by the region of your user when they receive that message. So maybe they're normally in the US, but they're on holiday right now. And all of a sudden, maybe your deliverability drops with that user on SMS.
And so that's something that you're tracking and being able to pay attention to if it's working, or you're able to see all the way down the pipe.
We're able to see a lot of that. So we are constantly monitoring the deliverability of each message that you're sending. We're looking at this across different channels. We're also looking at it across different providers within a given channel. So we do have customers that, for example, want to have multiple SMS vendors mapped to their SMS channel.
I mean, just to the complexity of also how it's delivered, the look of it, the style of it, etc. I feel like one of the things you told me when we were chatting is how LinkedIn has was it 50 engineers on just notifications?
Yeah, that's right. So they have most large tech companies have their own version of Courier, right? And they have teams or teams of teams that all they do for a living is build out their notification management systems. In the case of LinkedIn, which is one of the bigger ones we know about, their internal tool is called Air Traffic Controller. They've published some great content about this, but Air Traffic Controller, or ATC as they call it, is a team of 50 engineers that have been building out the mobile push, email, SMS, and in-app infrastructure for LinkedIn over the past 5 years.
They have an army of developers focused on just notifications. You're saying every major tech company has that, but for someone, a startup or a smaller organization, mid-size, can they really afford 50 developers?
Obviously not, right? And that's probably at the extreme end. We see, GitHub has 7, Airbnb has 35, Pinterest has 9, right? So you see these teams and teams of teams, but yeah, when you're just getting started, obviously you're not going to do that. And that's kind of our thesis is, can we build something that scales with you from when you're in your dorm room hacking on something give you the tools that make it easy there, but also scale with you as you become a more successful company.
Speaking of scaling, I mean, how are you able to go from one day two notifications to hundreds of thousands of notifications on one account to another account? Like, how do you scale?
So we've a lot of my team and I had experience at Eloqua, which was a messaging company and still is, and deals with billions and billions of messages. We had the opportunity to see how to build something at scale. At the time, using some older technology, and we saw kind of what the pain points were from that. So when we set out to build Courier, we said, okay, well, we know kind of some of the best practices, but we also know some of the downsides that those best practices have. We're starting something new, though. What can we do today that would make a big difference? And we ended up selecting serverless as our technology choice. So we don't have a single server. There's not a single EC2 instance.
No servers at all.
None. None at all. Completely serverless, functions all the way down using AWS Lambda and NoSQL databases.
And that's worked for you because it doesn't have any issues when suddenly you go from 0 to 100 or 100,000.
Right. There's all sorts of caveats and other work that has to go into it. It's not a magic potion, right? But very early on, we were able to have like essentially auto scaling infrastructure that was able to very quickly adapt to and handle large variances in demand from our customers. Something that would have been very hard to build out and probably prohibitively expensive in our earliest days.
But now it is feasible. But it's not something that everyone, an engineer developing a new solution, that they could just go serverless too.
I mean, look, you could. There are a few different serverless frameworks that I would generally recommend kind of grabbing one off the shelf to help orchestrate these solutions. So we use serverless.com. AWS has something called Amplify. There are a number of different options here that help make it easier, but it's all still pretty new, right? And we like the trade-offs for us are worthwhile because needing to be able to have the capacity to scale like that is so critical to what we offer. But if you were building, not to be diminutive here, but more of what we would call like a CRUD app, right? Where it's users like logging in, updating records, primarily user to software interactions as opposed to API based interactions. I don't know that it would be worth it to you. As opposed to like the benefits you would get as opposed to what you would trade off to not just spin up a Ruby on Rails app or something similar. It's probably not worth it.
Returns of what you get. But as far as when it comes to your costing and internal discussions of usage, you not having a server allows a much more simplified pricing structure for your application, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it as well. So we are usage-based pricing, as are most messaging companies. So users pay us per message. And ultimately, each one of those messages is invoking a function, which invokes other functions. And we're able to calculate out, hey, what does it cost us to send a message? And then thus, what should we charge per message? That is pretty straightforward when you're using serverless. There can be some challenges when you have to there's an impedance mismatch when you're going to I have a server farm and need to do this.
Got it. It's coming back to just the industry of messaging, of the notification concept. We're not going to decrease the quantity of notifications that need to happen in our applications. And if we think of the end user, that will only increase because we're just getting more softwares that we're using. What can you speak of kind of the future of where you see notifications going and being in 5 years from now?
I think as end users, I don't think we're going to see necessarily a reduction in notifications just because we have so many more companies vying for our attention. But I do think that what we will see individual companies do is potentially, in many cases, reduce the volume of notifications they send to each user. And one of the reasons why is I think that what's going to become critical is attention management. And one of the things that you really need to balance in today's world is creating high value interactions with your users, not just high volume. There was a time when high volume worked for you because there wasn't as many things in the space vying for your users' attention, so you could kind of dominate them. And like, I don't ever think that that was maybe a good behavior, but it demonstrably worked, right? Um, I don't think that works for most companies anymore, and honestly, I'm happy that that's the case, right? So now it's becoming about how can I send fewer but make them really impactful.
The age of just getting billions of Facebook notifications. Oh, this happened. Now people are annoyed even at their phones, their devices that stop notifying me. I don't want so much.
Right.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. I'm curious. You said less but better quality. Like, can you define that further? Of like what would that look like if we were to reduce the quantity of notifications but make them better?
Yeah, so there's a few different facets here, right? One of the things we're working on right now, actually, that we're releasing later this year is called digests. And that's the idea that, okay, start to intelligently group your notifications together so that instead of, LinkedIn, that big team, this is one of the key things that they do, right? If I send you an invite to connect with me on LinkedIn and so do 10 other people, you don't get 10 emails, right?
Hmm.
Now, an easy or the simplest path here is to just group them all and say have a daily digest or a weekly digest. That's a good place to start, right? But then you start to run into, well, but man, I really wish I knew about this one, right? And so that's when you start to think about, okay, can I do some signaling here and start to decide intelligently, in the case of, let's say, a LinkedIn style notification, should I deliver this invite to Alexander immediately, right? And maybe the next invite just gets put into the digest batch, right? Maybe the user that's requesting, the connection with Alexander shares a lot of first degree connections with him, right? And our model predicts we think he's going to want to accept. Whereas the next one's from a recruiter, he's going to say no, right? Just throw it in the digest.
It's almost like how can you get the messaging system to be as the old executive admin gatekeeper of like I don't need to know all this, just what I really want, so show me that.
That's right. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Are we there? Are we there? Are you guys able? You said you're rolling out your
Yeah,
digest
we're not.
feature.
Yeah, I mean, look, as an industry, we're there. If you have dozens of engineers, you can put on the problem, right? Is Courier there? Not quite, right? But we are building a lot of the kind of foundational elements, and I think we'll be there this year to help power that for our customers.
How can you get that? What data is needed to be able to make those intelligent decisions, though? Like, what inputs are you going to need to make that happen?
Yeah, so I think the inputs vary, right? Because what we just talked about is what I would call aggregation,
Mhm.
right? It's okay, send in the data and then put in, the extra metadata necessary to intelligently aggregate. But that's not honestly the only thing that you need here, because you also need to better understand things like timing of delivery, right? This is a key part of making a good notification experience for your user as well, is give it to them at a reasonable time. Obviously, don't deliver SMS messages at 3 a.m. Right? Like, I think we would all know not to do that. But also, like, is your product a work product or a personal product? And if so, like, do you maybe want to use that to think about when is the user likely to be thinking about the kinds of behaviors you want to encourage? If it's work related, maybe, should you be sending it at 7 p.m., right? Not only is that like disrupt their flow, but are you less likely to actually get their engagement at that point, and vice versa for personal products? And then, the other factor here is just where to deliver it, right? Should I, and this is where that multi-channel element comes into place, what's the best channel to deliver it to that user right now? So really, to kind of pull this all together, you need a suite of contact information for the user. That's what really tells you, here are the ways I could reach them. If you don't have their phone number, you're not sending SMS, right? If you don't have push tokens, you're not sending mobile push. You need locale and preference information, right? Metadata on top of that about the user, sometimes supplied by them, sometimes kind of inferred, right? That help you understand time zone and have they specifically unsubscribed from a certain channel. And then you need the metadata about the content right? And that's what helps you kind of pull that correctly into the aggregation layer.
I may understand a bit more just about Courier for. Does it just lay on top as just another API connection that goes through? So basically, the notification goes to you first and then goes to the end user. Do they see you at
Oh
all?
no.
Like how?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, the end user doesn't see us, right? We are a layer on top of our customers' existing channel providers. So let's say you were using SendGrid for email, Twilio for SMS, Apple Push Notification, or Firebase FCM for mobile push. You would
Mhm.
plug your API tokens for each of those services into Courier. And now your developer would use Courier's API instead of theirs. And we would do basically you would say, hey, Troy, send this notification to Alexander. We would do the routing layer, figure out when should this be delivered, which channel should be delivered on, should we aggregate this into a single digest. We'd go through a templating pass. What should it look like? That varies by channel, right? And then we would go through the deliverability pass of helping guarantee that delivery.
The traffic controller before it goes to the end
That's right.
delivery method. What I'm fascinated with is the area that we're in of just layer upon layer upon layer of SaaS and PaaS platforms that
Yeah,
enable the end
that's right.
consumer, but if anything, it just allows us to potentially develop faster and innovate faster, create new things,
Mhm.
and focus on what someone's really the main core product of what they do.
That's right. It's I always like to say it's turtles all the way down.
All the way down. Okay, I like that. I like that. For you, I mean, this is started 2 years ago.
2 years ago, as of a couple, 2 years and 1 week.
Okay, 2 weeks, 2 years in 1 week, and it's been you've been in the industry, so you've known it intimately yourself.
Yeah,
But this is your opportunity to bring it out
that's right.
and to make it happen. What are you, if you had to look ahead, the next five,
Mhm.
10 years with Courier, what are you most excited about? What can you share about the roadmap?
Wow, the roadmap. I mean, so our vision, our goal here is to be what we call the sensible default for software to human communication, right? So when we think about that roadmap, we're thinking about not just what are the services that we can provide those large tech companies that we some of which are our customers, but also, and this is what really gets me jazzed, is like what can I provide to that developer that's working out of the proverbial garage or dorm room, right? Building a side project, building their first startup. How can we just make it easier to build software? And how can we make it easier to build software that delivers a great experience to their user, right? Without them having to be an expert. And so a lot of what we focus on is building out those capabilities for the smallest of teams and making sure that Courier scales with them. But when we talk about digest, for example, that's the kind of thing you probably wouldn't build until you have tens of engineers on your team as a whole, right? We want to make it possible for you to do that when you're the only engineer, right? Um, we just launched in-app notifications, so you can have the toasts appear like in the corner of your app and have a little notification inbox where your user can see all of the notifications they've received from you and mark them all as read and get rid of the little badge on the bell. And we want that to be just a script tag you just drop into your web app or into your mobile app. That's kind of what we're really focused in on, is bringing that 50 engineer LinkedIn experience down to the college student working on a new app.
I love the desire to help the individual, but that allows it to scale. That you can have the same technical capabilities of a 50-person LinkedIn notification team
Yeah.
in your one-person operation, and allowing it to scale. I'm excited for the future that you paint. If there was any words of wisdom or advice that you would share with any developers out there, maybe when it comes to notifications or just in general in the space
Mm.
that you see going forward, what would you share?
Oh man. Well, so look, I would say the key thing outside of just notifications, but I think notifications are a part of this, is um, user experience has become increasingly important, right? And thinking about user experience from all the different angles. We're hiring up a lot of our marketing team at Courier right now, and so outside of what we offer to our customers, I'm thinking about me as a customer here, me as somebody who's building software. And one of the things I've learned is that in kind of today's self-service world, we need to be taking like a more holistic view of what user experience means. And I think product-led growth is probably the best framework for thinking about this for many of us. And that's something that we take really seriously internally at Courier. So we think about the marketing website as part of the user experience, right? It's not some asset marketing owns, right? What does the onboarding flow look like, right? We now have a dedicated team just for that onboarding flow, right? So as soon as you click the sign up button, how can we reduce all the barriers for getting value from the product? We have a big free tier. How do you construct an amazing user experience outside of just how they use the product?
The user experience from immediately recognizing you as a brand, that you exist,
That's
all
right.
the way through trial, through being able to get into it, not just let me use the product and experience there.
That's right. That's right. And that
I
includes the
imagine
notifications you send to them, but that's just one part of that pie.
that's just one piece of the pie. I think a lot of, especially product led options out there, not sales minded, but like product based founders or engineers, they may not think of it in that way. But I think it's a powerful insight for those who are product founders to design their software experience already from marketing, to not to say,
Right.
let me just build a product over here and eventually people will find it and see it, how great it is.
Absolutely.
It actually starts over here. That is powerful. And I see on your site, speaking of, you said your free tier. For those that want to try it out, you can go to courier.com. I'm curious actually how much that cost you.
More than the board wanted, I'll tell you that.
I love that. You're like, but it's good. We need it. It's a good name. 10,000 free notifications every month. So the idea is that for those that are still in the proverbial garage or apartment, they can be using this without potentially any additional cost when they're starting out.
That's right. That's right. You should be able to. Most companies can go a pretty long way without ever having to pay.
You're giving up a lot of money though, aren't you?
Well, look, the real secret here, right, is that the larger companies just send so many more notifications than you might think, that nickel and diming somebody who's sending 20,000 notifications is not really where the volume comes from for us.
Understand scale wise, like how many notifications does one of the big companies send?
So I was just yesterday, I was talking to a major software company that you'd have heard of, that they do source control management. I looked at one of their notifications that they were sending 130 million times a day.
130 million times a day. Okay, that's incredible. That definitely tells you the scale. That 10,000 a month.
Right, but we have late stage companies that are Series D that are B2B and notifications just aren't as frequent for them, and so they might only send 50,000. Right, so 10,000 can get you a really long way if it honestly somewhat depends on the nature of your product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, depending on where the notifications are built into the system. Well, I'm intrigued with what your approach and your right from the beginning, the thesis that it's a lot of work, and should you really be doing it? For those engineers out there, it is a question you just have to answer yourself. Do you really want to do this or not? If you don't, you can head over to Courier. But I'm also fascinated by the future of notifications and where we'll be headed. Would be much gladder if I have less notifications, but they're smarter.
Me too.
Let's make that happen.
Sounds good. That's the plan.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. You can head to uptechreport.com to see this full episode and a lot more. And you can head over to courier.com to sign up for those free 10,000 free notifications for your developing engineer. Thanks again, Troy, for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. It was great to be on.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.